Imagine this. You've just committed what you believe is the ultimate act of heroism. You've killed a tyrant to save your country. You step out into the street expecting crowds to cheer your name, to hail you as a liberator. But instead, you're met with absolute silence. Doors slam shut, people flee, and in that moment, you realize you've made the worst mistake of your life. Because the man you just murdered, his followers won't stop until every single one of you is dead. This is the true story of the assassination of Julius Caesar, and what I'm about to tell you is darker and more brutal than any revenge thriller Hollywood has ever made. 23 men stabbed Caesar to death on March 15, 44 BC. Not one of them survived more than 3 years. Not one of them died peacefully. This is the story of Rome's vengeance. The morning of the Ides of March was unnaturally quiet. Gray clouds hung over Rome like a burial shroud, and in the theater of Pompey, the Senate was gathering. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the world, walked in unsuspecting. What happened next took less than a minute. 23 senators surrounded him. 23 daggers rose and fell. Caesar tried to fight back at first, but when he saw Marcus Brutus among his attackers, his own protege, his spirit broke. He pulled his toga over his face, unwilling to let them see him die. The conspirators, led by Brutus and Cassius, actually washed their hands in Caesar's blood. They believed they were heroes. They believed Rome would love them for this. So they marched out into the streets, their hands still red, expecting celebration. Instead, they got something far more terrifying. Nothing. No cheers, no crowds, just empty streets and the sound of doors being locked. Rome wasn't celebrating. Rome was holding its breath, waiting for the storm. In the chaos that followed, 2 men saw their opportunity. Mark Antony, Caesar's most loyal general, a battle-hardened warrior who'd fought beside Caesar for decades, and Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew and adopted heir, a sickly boy who nobody took seriously. Together with a general named Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate. But this wasn't an alliance built on friendship. This was a pact forged in blood and rage, with one singular purpose: hunt down every single man who raised a blade against Caesar. And they had a weapon more terrifying than any army: the proscription lists. Imagine waking up one morning to find your name posted in the town square. It means you're no longer a citizen, your property is seized, and anyone, slave or citizen, who kills you gets a reward. Hundreds of senators found their names on those lists, 2,000 knights. Rome became a city of hunters and prey, where neighbors turned on neighbors, where slaves killed their masters for gold. This was the price of killing Caesar. The city drowned in blood. Gaius Trebonius thought he was safe. He'd played such a clever role in the assassination, keeping Mark Antony distracted outside the Senate chamber, engaging him in casual conversation while his fellow conspirators butchered Caesar inside. Now he was governor of the province of Asia, far from Rome, far from danger, or so he believed. But Caesar's avengers had long memories and even longer reach. Publius Cornelius Dolabella, one of Antony's men, came to the city of Smyrna under the cover of darkness. He gained entry through deception, found Trebonius, and dragged him from his bed. What happened next was designed to send a message to every conspirator still breathing. Trebonius was tortured for days. When they finally killed him, they beheaded him and kicked his head through the streets like a ball. His screams echoed as a warning: there is nowhere far enough to run. But perhaps no fate was more tragic, more bitterly laden with irony than that of Decimus Brutus. History often forgets him, overshadowed by his more famous cousin Marcus Brutus. Yet Decimus may have been the most crucial conspirator of all. He was one of Caesar's closest friends, so trusted that Caesar had named him in his will. And on that fateful morning, when Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, begged her husband not to go to the Senate because of her nightmares, it was Decimus who convinced him otherwise. "Come, Caesar," he'd said with a smile. "The Senate waits for you." It was the ultimate betrayal, a Judas kiss that led Caesar to death. After the assassination, Decimus tried to flee north across the Alps with his legions. But here's the thing about loyalty. Caesar's soldiers loved him more than life itself. One by one, Decimus's legions abandoned him. They defected to Octavian and Antony, choosing the memory of their fallen commander over the man who'd betrayed him. Decimus ended up alone, wandering through the forests of Gaul disguised as a Celt, hunted and desperate. A local chieftain captured him and sent word to Antony. The reply came swiftly: execute him. Decimus Brutus, Caesar's friend, was killed like a dog, and his head was sent to Rome as a trophy. By October of 42 BC, just 2 years after the assassination, the stage was set for the ultimate confrontation. In the plains of Philippi in Macedonia, the largest Roman armies ever assembled faced each other. On one side, Mark Antony and Octavian with 19 legions of Caesar's veterans, men who'd followed their commander through Gaul, across the Rubicon and into legend. On the other side, Brutus and Cassius, with forces they'd built by plundering the eastern provinces. This wasn't a battle. This was a reckoning. Republic versus empire. The old guard versus the new order. The assassins versus the avengers. And here's where the story takes a supernatural turn. In the nights before the battle, Marcus Brutus reported strange visions. A massive shadow appeared in his tent, a figure neither man nor God. "Who are you?" Brutus demanded. The apparition spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "I am your evil spirit, Brutus. You shall see me at Philippi." Whether this was Caesar's ghost or Brutus's guilt manifesting, we'll never know. But one thing is certain: the weight of what he'd done was crushing him.
The First Battle of Philippi was chaos incarnate. Dust clouds choked the air, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Brutus, showing the military skill that had made him one of Rome's finest commanders, launched a surprise attack on Octavian's wing. He completely overran their position, sent Octavian's forces fleeing, and even captured his camp. For a moment, it looked like the assassins might actually win. But on the other wing, Cassius faced Mark Antony, and Antony was a different beast entirely. A warrior forged in Caesar's campaigns, brutal and brilliant in equal measure. He smashed through Cassius's lines, scattering them like leaves in a storm. Cassius retreated to a hill to assess the situation, but the dust of battle obscured everything. Then he saw riders approaching. In his despair and paranoia, Cassius assumed they were enemies coming to capture him. They weren't. They were messengers from Brutus coming to tell them of their victory. But Cassius didn't know that, and in that moment of fatal misunderstanding, he made his final decision. Cassius called his freedman, Pindarus, to his side. He gave him one last order: "Take this dagger, end my life." The weapon Pindarus used was the same dagger Cassius had thrust into Julius Caesar 2 years earlier. The same blade that had spilled the dictator's blood now took the life of the man who wielded it. When Brutus arrived at the hill shortly after, he found not his co-commander, but his corpse. Standing over the body of his friend, tears streaming down his face, Brutus spoke words that would echo through history. "You were the last of the Romans." He knew then that their cause was lost, that the old republic was dead, and Caesar, even in death, was winning. For 3 weeks, the two armies stalked each other across the plains. Brutus's supplies were running low, his officers were losing faith, and every night that phantom allegedly returned to haunt his dreams. "You will meet at Philippi," the ghost kept saying. On October 23rd, the second battle began. This time, there was no surprise attack, no tactical brilliance that could save the Republicans. Antony's veterans, hardened by years of war, broke through the lines like a hammer through glass. The battlefield became a slaughter. Men who'd fought together under Caesar now killed each other in his name. As his forces crumbled around him, Brutus knew what awaited him if he was captured. He'd be paraded through Rome in chains, humiliated before jeering crowds, and executed as a traitor. He retreated to a rocky outcrop with a handful of loyal men. As the sun set, painting the sky blood red, he turned to his friend Strato. He quoted a line from Greek tragedy: "Poor virtue, you were but a word, yet I followed you as if you were real." Marcus Brutus asked Strato to hold his sword steady. Then, with the same resolve that had driven him to kill Caesar, he threw himself onto the blade. Mark Antony, when he heard of Brutus's death, felt something unexpected: respect. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the war, Antony recognized nobility when he saw it. He had Brutus's body wrapped in his own purple cloak and ordered an honorable burial. Octavian felt no such sentimentality. He ordered Brutus's head severed and sent to Rome to be thrown at the foot of Caesar's statue. But even in death, Brutus found a strange mercy. The ship carrying his head sank in a storm. The sea claimed what Rome could not. With Brutus and Cassius dead, the organized resistance collapsed. But the hunt wasn't over, not by a long shot. There was still assassins out there, still men who'd raised their daggers against Caesar. And Octavian's memory was very, very long. One by one they were tracked down. Casca, who'd struck the very first blow against Caesar, likely died at Philippi or took his own life shortly after. Cimber, Bucolianus, and others whose names history has forgotten met violent ends. Some were betrayed by their own slaves, tempted by the massive rewards. Others were murdered in their sleep by bounty hunters. The Roman Empire was vast, stretching from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, but it wasn't vast enough to hide from Caesar's revenge. Except for one man. Cassius of Parma had been one of the conspirators, and he was smarter than the rest. After Philippi, he fled and kept running, always staying one step ahead. He joined the forces of Pompey's son. When that failed, he incredibly joined Mark Antony himself when Antony broke with Octavian. For 14 years, he survived by constantly shifting allegiances, always moving, never staying in one place too long. 14 years of looking over his shoulder, sleeping with one eye open, knowing that somewhere out there, the most powerful man in the world hadn't forgotten him. In 31 BC, Octavian defeated Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium. Antony fled to Egypt and died in Cleopatra's arms. Octavian, now calling himself Augustus, stood alone as the undisputed master of the Roman world. The civil wars were over, the Republic was dead, the empire had begun. But there was still one loose end, one name left uncrossed on that list Octavian had been carrying for 15 years. Cassius of Parma was in Athens, finally believing himself safe. The wars were over after all. Augustus had bigger concerns than one old conspirator, or so he thought. Cassius was sitting at his desk, perhaps writing his memoirs, when the assassin entered his room. We don't know the killer's name. History didn't bother recording it, but we know what happened. Cassius of Parma, the last surviving assassin of Julius Caesar, was executed exactly as Augustus had ordered. The hunt was over. Every single man who'd raised a dagger against Caesar on the Ides of March was dead. The ancient historian Suetonius recorded it simply: none of the assassins survived Caesar by more than 3 years, and none died a natural death. But here's the cruelest irony of all. Brutus and Cassius and all the others believed they were saving the Roman Republic. They thought by killing Caesar they'd restore freedom and senatorial rule. Instead, they achieved the exact opposite. The power vacuum they created and the civil war that followed destroyed the Republic forever. They killed a dictator only to create an emperor. The Rome they'd fought to save died in the flames of war, and from its ashes rose an empire that would last 500 years. Julius Caesar's ghost had its revenge, not just on his murderers, but on everything they'd stood for. The Republic they died trying to save, Caesar's hair buried it forever. And that might be the most terrifying revenge of all.